Victoria from Biblio Lifestyle, and you're listening to the Reader's Couch podcast, the show that will help you bridge the gap between living a full and busy life to one where you're reading, learning new things, and having fun. Today on the couch, I'm so excited to welcome author Rachel Harrison to talk about her latest novel, Black Sheep. Black Sheep is a small-town horror novel where a cynical 20-something Vesper receives an unexpected wedding invitation from her unconventional family, prompting her to confront dark secrets and reckon with her own crisis of faith. Now, in this episode, Rachel and I talk about her new book, her inspiration for this story. We lightly touch on her previous works, and most importantly, the books she's reading and loving. But before we get into the episode, please take a quick second and leave the podcast a 5-star rating and review, because it's a great way to show your support and it helps keep me and the podcast going. So thanks in advance, and now on to the episode with author Rachel Harrison. Hi readers, welcome again to the Reader's Couch. I'm your host, Victoria Wood, and here on the couch with me is the national best-selling author of Such Sharp Teeth, Cackle, and The Return, as well as the story collection Bad Dolls. But she's here on the couch with me to talk about her new book, Black Sheep. Please welcome to the couch, Rachel Harrison. Hi, Rachel.
Hi, how are you?
I'm doing well. I'm so excited to have you here. Can't wait to talk about your new book. But before we get into it, I want to know how you're feeling. I know it's not your first rodeo, but Black Sheep is available. Readers can get their hands on a copy. How excited are you?
I'm very excited. It's funny because for the past month, I was like, it's my 4th book. It's fine. Like, I'm kind of used to it by now. But then the nerves started to kick in. So immune to it. I'm not immune to the pre-pub jitters. So I am very excited, but I think it doesn't really, you never get over the nerves.
Of course, I think that's expected. So you're excited, but a tad nervous. So it's just a mix of both. Sounds pretty normal to me. But I want readers to hear it from you before we kind of dissect things a bit. Tell us about your new book, Black Sheep. What's your elevator pitch? And what can readers expect when they pick up a copy?
So author Eric LaRocca describes Black Sheep as the Princess Diaries meets Dante's Inferno, which I think is kind of the perfect tease. It's about Vesper, who is a cynical, prickly girl in her early 20s who works at a chain restaurant serving like nachos and wings to the masses. She's been on her own since she was 18 when she fled her fanatical religious community and her family. And she left behind the only home that she ever knew and set out on her own. She's reluctant to admit that she misses home, that she misses her family, the people she grew up with, because she doesn't think she can go back. It's the kind of religious community where if you leave and choose not to participate in the faith, you're kind of excommunicated. So she assumes, that's all in the past. She can't see them ever again. But then one day she comes home and finds an invitation on her doorstep to her cousin Rosie's wedding. And it's on the family farm. So going to this wedding would mean going back home. And she has some mixed emotions about it, but ultimately she cannot resist the pull of family. And she goes back to see them and to this wedding. And it's not a spoiler to say this is a horror novel, so things don't go well.
Nope, they don't go well at all. But I'm so curious with the character Vesper and just the whole setting, small town, super religious. Like you mentioned, it's a horror. Vesper, I gathered, felt very much like an outsider. What inspired the character Vesper, but also the setting, small town vibes, and the novel itself?
So I think I was doing I wrote this book last summer, so it was kind of toward the end of isolation for the pandemic. And during the pandemic, we all had a lot of time to think. And so I've been thinking a lot about nature versus nurture. I'm in my early 30s, and I think this is really the time in our lives where we see our parents in ourselves. Like, we become aware that our parents are people, and that we may have picked up more from them than we thought. So which is like sweet sometimes and also sometimes terrifying. So I was confronting that a lot, and also doing a lot of doom scrolling, like we all did during the past few years, where we just spend a lot of time online and seeing people say, this is the worst time ever. The world is ending. We're all screwed, basically. And kind of reckoning with that. Like, is this the end of the world? Should I give up hope? And so that's kind of where the book came from. And Vesper, the culmination of all that cynicism, like, she is very cynical. She's very prickly. She is not a people person, and some of that is because, the product of doom scrolling in my state of mind. And some of that is function, because she's had to toughen up to live on her own and be independent. And she doesn't have her family. She can only rely on herself. So some of her prickliness comes from that as well. And as far as setting goes, I wanted to set the book in New Jersey because I'm a Jersey girl, and I wanted to set a book in my home state. And there's also some lore that kind of ties in to the book, Jersey lore. And New Jersey is called the Garden State for a reason. There's a lot of farmland. And I thought about, sometimes you drive past a barn and, maybe what's inside would surprise you. And so I was thinking about that, and I thought, like, wouldn't a Victorian farmhouse with a barn in the back be a really cool setting for a horror novel? So that's kind of how I came up with the funky setting. And once you open the doors to the barn and to Vesper's mother's house, there's some fun, grim things that wait there. So, but I'll save that for readers to discover on their own.
Yes, absolutely. But also on the note of Vesper's mother, because I would be remiss not to mention her. She's a bit cold herself, a bit distant. When Vesper returns home, her mother isn't quite receptive towards her return. And I appreciated that even though this was a horror, you could feel the familial trauma, complicated mother-daughter dynamic. Was this intentional to kind of infuse these stories with these complicated women?
Definitely. I think part of it just comes from function. Like, I write kind of what I know and what I experience, and a lot of my protagonists have a lot of me in them. So in that way, it's not really intentional. It's just, I guess, subconscious. But I did want the book to explore some deeper topics about how, we don't really get to pick who we're related to, and how that can be traumatic, and it can be terrifying when you realize you share DNA with people who are so different from you and have completely different values, and wondering where they stop and you start, and making those distinctions. And I wanted the relationship Vesper has with her mother to kind of have that push-pull tension that I could draw throughout the book, because if Vesper was at odds with her entire family, then I don't think she would want to go home at all. But most of her extended family, she has a lot of love for. It's just her mother. And so even though, but just her mother might not be enough to stop her from going home. And I think part of Vesper wants her mother's approval. I think, as kids, we always want approval from our parents. Like, I think it's a, just like bone level want that we all have. So in some way, even though you would think, oh, Constance is so terrible, why would she ever want to see her mother again? She's still searching for that love and approval. So I needed there to be like something at home that would have like a magnetic pull for her that would be a little bit deeper than, you know, oh, it's just the faith thing that like, I don't want to go back because I don't believe this. There needed to be more of like family tension and drama to kind of bring her back and push her away and bring her back and push her away.
Absolutely. So I'm curious, outside of Vesper, who was your favorite character to write or discover as you were writing Black Sheep?
I'm trying to think because all of the other characters are quite complicated. They have their good qualities and their bad qualities. And I sort of see them all through Vesper's eyes because I write first person. But I guess I would have to say Constance, even though she is like cold and cutting and like kind of terrible. She was fun to write because I needed to strike a balance of mystery with her that would make readers a little bit more curious and kind of suspect there might be something more to her than she is showing Vesper. So I love a challenge, and I think Constance was a challenge.
I can see that. So I'm curious about your other works in relationship to Black Sheep. Now, I read and loved The Return, which was about a group of girls. You also have Cackle, Such Sharp Teeth, and of course, Black Sheep. What would you say is the similarity within all these books? I think it's the female characters and of course the horror. But are there any similarities, but also any differences between your novels?
So I think they differ a little bit in how grim they are, but I've thought about this a lot, and I think all of my books deal a lot with shame. In The Return, shame around losing your friends or drifting apart from your friends. In Cackle, shame around not being in a romantic relationship or not, fulfilling the role that society thinks you should fulfill, feeling shame and insecurity around that. And in Such Sharp Teeth, it's about shame about our bodies and living in a body and having to deal with shame about abuse. And in Black Sheep, it's shame about family, being ashamed that maybe your family isn't the same, doesn't meet the expectation of family generally. I love my family, but a little dysfunctional. And I remember growing up, going to my friends' houses and being like, oh, their families are so perfect. And of course, that's just the illusion. Like, nobody's family is perfect. But feeling shame about, I don't have the Norman Rockwell like perfect family. So I definitely think when I like sit down and really analyze it, there's the through line of shame, which makes them sound not fun. But I think all my books, I try and make them fun and entertaining to read.
Yes, for sure. I can say they're entertaining. Yes, absolutely. So getting into your writing life a bit, how long did it take for you to pull together Black Sheep? And also being a bit greedy at the same time, are you working on any other projects?
So Black Sheep was a little bit tricky. It was the first time that I wrote a book that was already under contract. So I kind of promised a pitch to my publisher and then had to execute on the pitch, which was a little stressful because there's already the pressure of like, I told them I was going to give them something and now I have to deliver that. So I wrote an outline and then I wrote a draft of the book that was beat for beat the outline, and it didn't work. And I had to scrap that and start over. And the actual writing, I think, took me about from January till August, which was a little bit longer for me just because it kind of took a little bit of finagling to get right. And currently, I am due to get edits on my next book, which is called So Thirsty. And the quick pitch is it's like a Thelma and Louise with vampires kind of deal. So I'm really excited to work on that one and hopefully get it out next spooky season for everybody.
Yay! Amazing. Sounds good. So, looking back now, you have 4 novels and a story collection. If you could tell your younger writing self anything, what would it be?
Oh gosh. Relax, maybe. Which is funny now because I am jittery about Black Sheep. But I think when it's easy to feel defeated when you're younger, or to feel like also like if I only got published, then I would be happier. I would have made it. Like the longer you work at writing, the more like the finish line will always be pushed further and further away. So to just relax and enjoy it and not put so much pressure on myself. And I would tell myself that now too. Do as I say, not as I do.
Yeah, for sure. But I think that advice could be applicable at any time. So before, after, during, yeah. Yes, absolutely. So I want to get into your reading life, Rachel, because even though I know we're discussing your book, Black Sheep, I always want to know what our authors are reading. So tell me about the last book or books that you finished reading that you'd now recommend.
So I just finished Whalefall by Daniel Kraus, and that book is phenomenal. I really recommend that one. And then I think my favorite book that I read this year is called Mavefly by C.J. Lead. And it's kind of pitched as like a female-led American Psycho. And it's set in Los Angeles, and it's like kind of a love letter to LA, and it's also like bloody and fun. And it's just exceptional. I really, really loved that book.
Awesome. Any childhood favorites that you can remember?
So the book that I remember most reading when I was a kid was The Stinky Cheese Man and Other Fairly Stupid Tales. It was like very snarky takes on fairy tales. And I think it just blew my little mind because I was like obsessed with fairy tales. Like I was a little princess, and like reading these kind of like blunt, dark, like darkly funny takes on the fairy tales just like blew me away. Like I didn't know what to do with it as a kid. But I would love to get my hands on a copy now. I would love to have one to like revisit it in adulthood and see how I feel about it. But that was one of my favorite books as a kid.
I think I might add that one to my TBR. Sounds very interesting. I've never heard of it. So exciting. So I'm curious, what books are you looking forward to reading in the year ahead?
So this is a very hard question for me because I get a lot of I read a lot of books that are coming out in the future, and then I can't wrap my mind around what's coming out. I know for a fact that Nick Medina, who wrote Sisters of a Lost Nation, he just announced a book called Indian Burial Ground, which comes out, I believe, in April. And I really love Nick's work. I love Sisters of the Lost Nation. So I'm looking forward to that. And then Sean Hamill, who wrote A Cosmology of Monsters, I know he has a book coming out called The Dissonance, but I don't know when that's coming out. Mm-hmm. But, for the most part, I just kind of like anything that Paul Tremblay releases. I'm, waiting with bated breath for the next Alexis Henderson book. So I kind of just latch onto authors and just wait, anxiously await whatever they release, whenever they release it. I know that I'm in.
Yay, I love that. I think lots of us as readers, we're the same way. We tend to latch onto authors too. But I'm going to solicit you for some advice, Rachel, because I know sometimes as listeners and readers, we might find ourselves in a reading slump from time to time, or someone might be listening who's trying to get back into reading, and they're listening to this episode now and they're trying to find that time to pick up a book. What advice would you give? What has worked for you? For one, readers in a slump trying to get out, but also two, someone trying to make more time for reading and their books.
So I think if you're in a slump, my advice would be to be okay not finishing a book. I invented something for my husband who doesn't like he's like, I started this book, I have to finish it. I started something called book jail, which maybe sounds harsh, but I said, have a shelf and say, I'm going to put this book in book jail. It's not grabbing me. Maybe I'll come back to it later if I'm still thinking about it, or if it's not for me, it's not for me. And then I know, I think it's hard to get out of a slump if you feel like you really have to push yourself through a book that you're just not into. Not every book is for everybody, and that's the beauty of reading. So be okay not finishing a book. Put it in, I was going to say book purgatory, but that also sounds kind of harsh. Put it in your maybe later or maybe never pile. And also, if you're in a slump, I think going to the bookstore and kind of treating yourself, or the library, and browsing for something that might get your attention. I think there's magic about being surrounded by books. So that might inspire you to pick up something new or to just be more motivated to read. And then as far as making time to read, this is advice that I need to take myself. We spend a lot of time on our phones, scrolling through social media, binge watching shows. I think in general, we need to kind of monitor. I say we, really, I'm just projecting. I need to really start taking stock of, I just spent how much time scrolling on my phone where I could be reading. Or I just let this Netflix show go to the next episode and I'm not even registering the time that's passing. So I think we all have more time than we realize, because our time is very easily wasted these days. So if you want to make more time to read, instead of scrolling on your phone for 10 minutes in the morning, if you read a couple pages, or read a chapter, or maybe pick up a short story collection, because that's easier to pick up and put down. Those are some things I think we can do. Again, we is really just me for watching way too much TV and spending way too much time on the artist formerly known as Twitter. But yeah, I do think there is time to read if you want to make it.
Yes, if you want to read, I think you can find some time, but something's going to have to give. I truly believe that. So if it's the TV show, if it's the social media doom scrolling, yeah, something has to give. So Rachel, on the show, we're big supporters of indie bookstores. Share with us some of your favorite local indies.
So some of my favorite local indies, I'm in the Rochester, New York area. So Book Eater in Rochester just opened. It's a great bookstore / cafe, beautiful reading spaces, and great coffee, great food. So it's like a destination. You can spend hours in there. And then another Chapter bookstore in Fairport, New York. Just really wonderfully curated store. And then the Dog-Eared Book in Palmyra, New York, also very wonderfully curated. And the bookstore dog is my favorite. I go in there to sign every year, and I'm just I just want to stay in here forever so I can hang out with this dog.
Yes.
And I also want to shout out All She Wrote books in Somerville, Massachusetts, and An Unlikely Story in Plainville, Massachusetts. I have 2 events there at each store in fall. Well, I have an event at both stores this fall, so I'm really grateful to be visiting those stores. So, yeah, that's my you say indie bookstore, and my I just start I feel like every reader can relate to that, where you just get so excited. You're like, what's every wonderful indie bookstore I've ever been to?
Exactly, just that. Even when you were mentioning the one with the dog and not wanting to, I'm like, yes. We love our indies for sure. They're so important. And yeah, I wish I could stay and never leave. No question about it. Always love it there. Well, kind of wrapping things, Rachel, I know you've written a book. I know you're a mix of excited, but also a bit nervous and jittery. But in an ideal world, how are you hoping, or what are you hoping readers might think or feel after they've turned the last page of Black Sheep?
Ultimately, I hope readers feel satisfied. I hope they've had a really fun time. And yeah, I mean, everyone's going to take something different from the book, but if I could hope for anything, it would just be that feeling of like, wow, I just had a ton of fun. I hope that it's a fun escape, and they get scared and they laugh, and it's a good time.
Love it. Love it. Absolutely. Rachel, thank you so much for coming on the show and speaking with me. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Thank you for having me. It was lovely to talk to you.
Thank you so much for listening to the Reader's Couch podcast. Please subscribe to the show, share it with a friend, and take a few seconds to leave a rating and review. Until next time, stay lounging, stay reading, and whenever you're in doubt, go straight to your local bookstore or library. Thanks again for listening, and happy reading.